That lob inside. Richards did well to catch it, and then he's dominated by Draymond. He roofed him. It's a 2-on-1. Trace Jackson-Davis lays it up and in. Andrew Wiggins leading the break. So the Dubs 14-3 run, and a beautiful way to respond coming out of halftime.
Hey, everybody. Welcome in. It's Dubs OT with JD, John Dickinson, Greg Silver on hand as well. We're coming to you here on YouTube, Twitch, and the Twitter X stream at KNBR on all of those different platforms as the Warriors do win in Charlotte. The road trip continues now, fourth game of 5, and the Warriors improve to 3-1 as they get the job done. Big third quarter. Fitz and Kalena, NBC Sports Bay Area there on the audio that we played here coming in, part of the 39-26 third quarter that helped the Warriors take control, and never a lot of drama tonight, really, for the most part. The first half was kind of a slog. Warriors were only up 5 at the half, Greg, but no Jonathan Kuminga again. And then the Warriors found out about 30 minutes before tip, maybe even a little bit sooner than 30 minutes before tip, that they weren't going to have Klay Thompson as well. And this was the first, what I would have deemed to be no excuses game in a while. Doesn't matter you don't have Kuminga. Doesn't matter you don't have Klay Thompson. You need to go beat Charlotte on the road. And the Warriors handled business. All of a sudden, you look up and Golden State finds themselves winners of 3 consecutive games. They're 39-34. Doesn't change much as far as the overall standings go. The Rockets have won 10 in a row. They're going to play Utah tonight. That game's just underway. But the Warriors, at a minimum, Greg, are starting to play better basketball. And another example of they just come out and there's just more energy, there's more focus, there's more intent to compete on the road, even against a team having as awful a season as Charlotte is.
Yeah, I mean, this is the type of game you would like to think that the Warriors could afford to rest a couple of guys, or at least let their slight injuries and ailments heal a little bit, whatever we want to deem.
Well, they could have. I don't want to jump you right off the bat. They could have. We'll get to that because I thought they chose not to. And, I mean, that is something I want to get you. I won't let you kind of stretch your legs a little bit here at the top of the show. But that was one thing that kind of bugged me a little bit. And it ties into the Minnesota game from Sunday at the beginning of the trip, and something we talked about on Dubs OT then. But didn't mean to jump you as people file in here on YouTube and Twitch. I know you're used to it at this point. I mean, this is 4 months now of us working together. But yeah, I'm with you on the could have rested some guys, and then I mean, I guess maybe you can't because the Warriors have blown so many leads this year.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to kind of go along the line of you'd like to think that even without Jonathan Kuminga and Klay Thompson, you should be able to execute well enough to get past the Hornets team. But for the better part of the season, that has not been the case with this Golden State Warriors group. And tonight, really ugly second quarter. I thought first quarter, they were actually really dialed in. I know I sent this to you and tweeted this out myself, but as to get a little bit of an early fun with numbers kind of thing. In the last 4 games on this road trip, they're averaging just 18 opponent scored points in the first quarter. So some of that's been not playing high caliber competition or undermanned teams, but I think their defense by and large has been really good. And really the second quarter wasn't great, but 3 of 4 quarters strong for the Dubs, and they were able to handle business without too much of a sweat.
Yeah, they do get the job done. Again, it winds up being a 115-97 win for the Warriors over the Hornets. Again, no Kuminga, no Klay Thompson. Just kind of running through some of my notes from this one, Greg, and there really weren't a whole lot of them. You typically, sometimes I like to bullet point things out. I might have as many as, 6 or 8 different things that I'll write down per quarter. Tonight, I've got 2 in the first quarter. I've got 2 lines worth of the first quarter, 3 in the second quarter, only 2 in the third quarter, and then a couple in the fourth quarter off of some of the antics that were going on. I mean, that was the other thing that kind of I found myself getting a little heated prepping for the show. The whole Grant Williams Draymond thing, where you've got Grant Williams trying to goon it up against Draymond. We can get into that, and I'm just thinking, is Draymond really going to be foolish enough to take the bait? Now he didn't take the bait, but it just seemed like coming off of the other night. And I actually thought I'll spend a quick couple of minutes on this here, a couple seconds on this now. I actually thought, I know people were kind of saying, it was a foolish challenge, or, maybe Steve is trying to cater to Draymond a little bit too much by challenging that offensive foul that Grant Williams drew. I thought it was great, not because he thought he was going to win the challenge, and I don't think there was any chance in hell he was going to win the challenge. And I didn't look at it as he was trying to placate Draymond as much as just take a timeout, and you're going to get a longer timeout than a normal timeout if they go to the board and review it. And I'm interested to see if anybody asks Steve Kerr about it. But I thought it calmed everything down in a moment where things needed to be calmed down. Like, the worst thing that to me could have happened, and I didn't tweet this, although I was about to, but then they challenged it, I would have taken Draymond out of the game at that point. And the Warriors were up big. And so, I think you could have, you just can't let he doesn't like Grant Williams. Like, there's clearly this, list of guys around the league, and, the guys that try to goon it up the way Draymond at times has done throughout his career, typically the guys that he, will mix it up and not want to back down against. And, you got Grant Williams from the Celtics and a couple of years ago in the finals and all of that. So I liked the timeout to challenge it, only because it was going to give you like a 3 or a 4 minute break. 5-minute break, I think, is what it ended up to just let everybody cool down. You can get everybody over at the bench. Again, I don't think Draymond was going to be foolish enough to take the bait, but there's a moment there where you just don't know, because it's Draymond and because of the things that we've seen as recent as a couple of days ago, where sometimes he just will not let it go. Fortunately, he did let it go. But yeah, strategically bedamned. I didn't think that had anything to do with it. I thought it was an awful challenge from the point of view we're going to get the call, but I think it was a good challenge to just stop the game at that point and not let those two continue to go out and slug it out, basically in a game that was over at that particular point in time.
Yeah, just welcoming some of the chat, and also just a reminder to all that we are still working on being able to take calls on YouTube shows. So anyone on the phone lines, tonight's not the night for it, unfortunately, but come hang with us in the chat. And I'm agreeing with a lot of what you're saying, JD, with the Grant Williams thing and placating Draymond a little bit. I mean, yeah, it was an interesting challenge. I mean, I thought that Grant Williams actually put himself in a nice position, given that what was I going to say with that? Given that what constitutes an offensive foul in today's NBA can be very subjective at times on a given night. I actually thought, by the textbook definition of it, Grant Williams was set. He was outside the restricted area. So I don't really know what the strategy on that one was. I think the challenge thing has been a little difficult for Steve Kerr at times, and sometimes he's just held onto it a lot of times when he maybe could have used it, and then we'll spend it on something late. I think that because of the margin of error that this team has, which is really slim, he usually likes to use it in situations of saving a foul for somebody like Draymond, or if Steph has one of those nights where he's getting into foul troubles and reaching a lot, he'll probably save it too. But yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on just the way challenges have been navigated by the staff in general, as they get into some possible must-win games coming up here?
Pretty terribly. I think I don't know. I had the good fortune of being able to trick my way into getting the Charlotte feed. I've got a little scam that I do, because I get the NBA League Pass Mix channel, and now that I've got the home studio farther along, not necessarily behind me, but in front of me, I've got the home studio farther along to where I do have multiple televisions now in the studio room. And so what I do, and I won't belabor this, but what I'll do is I'll get the NBA League Pass Mix channel on DirecTV up, and that typically will play, not always, but 90% of the time they'll play the home team feed. And so, but it's the one with like 8 games on at once or 6 games on at once, but you can pick which game you want the audio from. So I just on the one screen pick the audio from the Warriors game, which is the Charlotte, and then I sync that up with another TV, which is dedicated to the NBC Sports Bay Area feed. And then I get, it's a way to, it's avoidance.
Were you getting some Eric Collins tonight?
Yeah. Eric Collins and Del Curry tonight. And they had Seth Curry on their broadcast as well. And so that's a way, obviously blackout restrictions and all that being in the Bay, you can't choose you have to take your local feed. But they said on the Charlotte broadcast, the reason I brought this up was not to drone on about my little trick. It was more they said on the broadcast, I don't know if they said it on the Warrior feed, but Eric Collins said the Warriors are 11. I don't know if he said 11. He said 11 and 27. He might have meant 11 of 27. I'll have to dig up the number, but either way, it's not good in terms of Steve Kerr challenges. In fact, he kind of went on a little, hey, Kerr was voted one of the best coaches, of all time, and he's got all these championships, but he's got to improve his replay challenge percentage, and then he gave the number, which obviously is not great.
Yeah, there were a couple that stick out to me. Like I remember at the end of the Sacramento game when they blew the 24-point lead, when they were unraveling, they held on to it and used it on the Steph Curry kicking his leg out to save a foul for him. But I thought that was a pretty clear-cut call. So I could go on and on. That's just one example. But I just kind of wonder if a lot of times he's trying to cater to certain players. And like he was using challenges on Kuminga type of calls around the time when he was starting to show that he wanted to know that Kuminga had the trust of the team a little bit. So I kind of wonder if it's a player management tool more so than I'm going to challenge the call tool. And I'm not saying that I agree with that philosophy, but it seems like it to me.
I'll tell you what Del Curry said. Del Curry said that Steve uses challenges. I mean, he said it. He said Steve takes challenges to placate his stars. I mean, and that was basically his theory on the Draymond one. It was like, well, we're basically trying to make Draymond feel better about the situation with Grant Williams. So I don't know if he's got any insight there. I mean, you can, probably not, but you never know. But yeah, that was sort of his take on it from afar. And no, I just not to overly psychoanalyze it, but I do think Steve Kerr, he doesn't love the whole challenge thing to begin with. So I think at times he's got a little bit of an ob bleep it mentality. Like it's all, it's all kind of flip a coin anyway. I really don't want to challenge any of these. I don't care if I get it right or wrong. Kind of like a little bit of an indifference, I think, to it with him. And so, he tries to get it right. The coaching staff tries to get it. They're not the only team in the league that struggles with it. And at times, sometimes struggles with the communication. It seems like the communication part of it's pretty on point, but yeah, I gave my theory. We're interested to see if anybody asked him about it in the post game, but I thought it was worth just stopping the game at that point. Like and maybe I'm giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt and saying, hey, he didn't really think that they could overturn it, or maybe he was trying to placate Draymond, whatever. Calming Draymond down in that situation though is, I think, the number one priority considering everything that happened on Wednesday and the conversations that have come forward here over the course of the last 48 plus hours since Draymond got himself thrown out of that game in Orlando. So it is Dubs OT with JD, John Dickinson, Greg Silver as well for KNBR, the sports leader, as we are off and rolling. Appreciate everybody on YouTube and Twitch chiming in here on this one as the Warriors do get the win. 15 to 97, 115 to 97. I kind of checked out the last 2-3 minutes. I was getting some things ready, so I want to make sure I get the score right. As far as just some of the notes from this one, I thought Wiggins and Trace Jackson Davis, I think are two that really need to be pointed out. Just overall. Moses Moody would probably be a third. I didn't think Wiggins got off to the best start in this one. He made a three, and then, he got the ball in that little about 4 feet in, and he short-armed the shot that should have been easy. He overpassed out the shot clock. There was a shot clock violation. He kind of drove, got himself in the air, kicked it out. The clock ran. I thought Wiggins was actually struggling early, but he was really good as the game went on. He got progressively better as the game went on. I thought he had a really nice second half. I thought he was much more aggressive. And then Trayce Jackson-Davis, he was getting buckets early for the Warriors. They're finding him in ways that he can be of use to them as a scorer. He got a lot of the Kuminga buckets tonight. You're looking at ways that you can get some offense, and Trayce has the ability to score around the basket, and the Warriors dominated the paint. That was one of the stories of this game. 64-38, the Warriors dominate the paint, and a lot of that was TJD, who had a Kuminga-like line with 18 points on 9 of 13 and basically everything at the rim. So Wiggins,
3 blocks.
Yeah, 3 blocks as well. He's been really impactful. And he's growing, I think, into being a big part of the Warriors' future plans. How that's going to shake out with Draymond and Kuminga, and it's going to be interesting because we've talked about the potential challenges. Like, you can play Trayce Jackson-Davis and Draymond Green together. Like, that isn't the issue. You can play TJD, Draymond, and Wiggins together. The issue is, especially when Wiggins is playing the way that he is, the problem is, can you play Trayce Jackson-Davis, Draymond Green, and Jonathan Kuminga together? And I think the answer to that as a starting lineup is a resounding no at this point. And I think Steve Kerr would tell you that that's a resounding no. Douglas Mikes, TJD should be starting. Well, okay, then who's not? Then who's out? Because I'm telling you, the Kuminga at the 3 thing ain't happening this year. And so, he ain't starting over Wiggins, who's playing better, and then Draymond. Like, you don't have enough shooting with that group, even if it's Steph and Clay, who are the other 2. So I'm not as concerned about the future and who should be starting and all of that. Trayce Jackson-Davis is going to be somebody that's playing 25 minutes a game, I think, for the Warriors from now on into the future next year. Now, if that means because Draymond and Kuminga are a pairing that you need to have in your starting lineup, then so be it. TJD will come off the bench and you'll figure out different lineup combinations that can work if you're the Warriors. But it is not as simple as TJD should start, unless you want to say either Kuminga is not going to start, as Tony Smith chimes in. And again, that's not, I don't think that's a conversation for the remainder of this season, but how's Kuminga going to take that? Like, let's just be honest. How is Jonathan Kuminga going to take coming off the bench after, playing as well as he has to this point and having his career kind of like it? So it's, again, you can say, I don't think that's crazy, to be honest. But again, if you're going to say TJD needs to start next year, well, then that means Draymond or Kuminga are probably not starting next year. So you pick one of them. And so again, that's more of an off-season conversation. It's a roster composition question. But yeah, TJD, Wiggins, and then I would say Moody, who actually hit some threes tonight, 4 for 5 from 3 for 15 points in 25 minutes. Those would be the 3 that I would single out. And then obviously Steph came alive in the third and had some big shots and finished with 23 in his hometown. He always likes putting on a show for the folks back in Charlotte.
Yeah, hit a couple bombs there deep, especially one at the end. I think that got it to 108-85 was the score. So not really an official night, but kind of a nice little cherry on top for Steph and a homecoming. And yeah, I think what I would say, going off of what you just talked about with Trayce Jackson-Davis, Moody, and Wiggins having good games, is we've seen this a couple games in a row now where even though Wiggins got off to a slow-ish start, really picked it up later, I think when you get other contributors like that, you see that Steph doesn't have to just take on such a big load so early in the game when he's clearly working through a little bit of fatigue right now, both physically and when you look at last game, I think it's fair to say emotionally too. Steph only took 4 shots through the first 20 minutes of the game. He took 3 late in the second quarter, but 7 shots in the first half isn't anything that crazy for the number 1 player on a team that desperately needs him. But when you have Wiggins picking up some slack and Moody was finally finding a shot after struggling for the most part over the last month or so, and then you get Trayce Jackson-Davis getting a lot of, I think, Kuminga buckets was a nice way to put it, getting the Kuminga type of buckets and a lot of second effort type of shots inside for Trayce Jackson-Davis. You took the load off of Steph Curry. I mean, he has 17 points and 23 points in the last 2 games, which for him isn't anything all that crazy. But when you have an Andrew Wiggins to play the basketball he's been playing, and Looney was even chipping in, like he doesn't really take a lot of shots or score much, but at one point he had 8 points in 7 minutes, I think. So, Klay often when he's going can fill a little bit of that gap and take some of the slack away, but you didn't even have him tonight. So you didn't have Klay or Kuminga. The names you mentioned, JD, I think it was nice to see them play a solid performance for their sake, but also for the sake of Steph Curry, who didn't have to put up 25 shots before you even get to the fourth quarter.
No, and I wonder how much of Wiggins being more aggressive, and he took 17 shots and had 20 points, and it wasn't just shots. I mean, he had 8 assists, he had 8 rebounds, he had a couple of steals. He had Wiggins was just freaking active. Like he was the guy that they need him to be, and that he was really, during the run of a couple of years ago. And I wonder though, how much of him being more aggressive, Greg, is Kuminga's out, Klay Thompson's out. It's like by force, right? It's just, and part of it could be, look, we've talked about it. Kuminga he likes to shoot. Kuminga likes and wants to shoot. He's not Klay Thompson, but in his own way, he kind of is Klay Thompson. Like, how many times do we look up into the first quarter and Kuminga's got 6 shots or 7 shots? And it doesn't always end up that way. He kind of, and look, a lot of the times they're good shots. I mean, if they're dunks, that's fine. If they're 3 balls, maybe not. Or if they're pull-up jumpers, maybe not. But I do think at times, and this goes back to the pre-Draymond return from his suspension, I do think at times the personality types of on the court of Wiggins and Kuminga work against each other, because Wiggins just naturally wants to defer and Kuminga wants to dominate, basically, and dominate the ball, dominate the scoring department, dominate the at the rim. So I think, again, those two have proven that they can play together with Draymond. So it's not really a commentary about that specifically. It's more just, can Wiggins find ways to be aggressive consistently when it's not just, all right, by force, you have to be the number 2 because the other 2 dudes who have no problem taking 15, 20 shots if they need to are not playing. How do you kind of read that?
I think it's a fair assessment, and I will read it a lot better and more clearly when Jonathan Kuminga does come back. But, Klay Thompson was around in some of the games that we've seen Wiggins really step up. And with Wiggins, it's almost opponent-based too sometimes. I think there's certain types of teams where his game and sort of steady solidness really thrives, and he's able to try to score a little bit more. But it's nothing against Jonathan Kuminga that he likes to shoot. I think that's totally fair to say. We've seen him like to score inside, but also like to get some jumpers going too sometimes. So, that could be part of it. But then again, if you're Andrew Wiggins, there's no reason why you shouldn't be willing to be aggressive, given that you're one of the more athletic players on any given night out there on the floor. I think that Steph plays a pretty unselfish style of superstar ball. Draymond is always looking to pass first out there. So sure, that gives you Kuminga and that gives you Klay Thompson, who both like to get their fill of shots, but Chris Paul's not a volume shooter by any means. So I don't think there's not enough to go around for him.
No, I would agree with that. And yeah, Steph didn't take a shot, for example, in this game, until it was almost 8 minutes into the game. And so, Clay will get his shots up. Kuminga will get his shots up. I think it might be a matter of like when Kuminga's at his best, and I've said this a lot, when Kuminga's at his best, it's in the context of the offense. It's not when the Warriors are actively feeding Kuminga. It's when they're just kind of running their stuff. And, there's Kuminga for a dunk. There's Kuminga for a quick one-step drive and a layup and a foul. He just had a breakaway off of his own defense, and he gets a dunk that brings everybody to their feet if the Warriors are playing at Chase Center. When Kuminga's at his best, it's more just in the flow of everything. Clay is going to take Clay shots, good, bad, indifferent. Steph can get in. Steph can be uber aggressive. He can be, somebody that kind of lets the game come to him. I guess maybe the answer is because of that, because you're never worried about Clay getting his shots up, because you like Kuminga the most, at least I do, when it's in the flow of everything else, and Steph is going to be fine over the course of a 48-minute game. Maybe the onus has to be on the Warriors to get Wiggins, to make sure they get Wiggins involved early. A little bit, knowing that Kuminga is going to get his and Clay will take his, depends on the night if he's making them, and Steph is Steph. And I know, Kerr mentioned that a little bit. I thought after one of the bad games, I can't remember, the Knicks game maybe, Kerr said, hey, I got to get Wiggins going a little bit more. Some players you just have to prod. Some players you just have to tell them over and over and over to stay aggressive. And, again, easier to do, I think, for Wiggins tonight, but the Warriors need this Wiggins even when they have everybody.
Yeah, and I know that the NBA, JD, isn't as simple as like, let's just run some Wiggins plays and get him going and see if we can get him 6 points in the first 4 minutes. Like, yeah, that's not exactly how it works. I think we've even seen with some of these younger players what happens when you're on the scouting report or there is more of a focus on you. But that being said, yes, it's not that simple, but it's almost worth it to really make a point to go and get Wiggins going. Because if we're just going to take it at a face value, you take game where Wiggins plays his really good brand of basketball versus game where Wiggins seems a little bit more invisible. That's a pretty big difference. I don't know if you say the same for other players not named Steph. Maybe Clay a little bit.
Yeah, maybe Clay.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think, I think you got to try to get Wiggins to be, and because it's not just scoring though, and that's the other part to this. It's Wiggins can make an impact on the game. He doesn't have to score 20 to make an impact on the game in other ways. In fact, there are nights where he could be a 12-point guy if it's let's say 4 of 6 with a couple of threes, or he can be a 12-point guy, but he can always be, I think, an 8-rebound guy. And he can often be a guy that gets, a few assists in the context of what the Warriors are trying to do. But it's just a matter of some nights you can see he's got it. Other nights he doesn't. Tonight he did. He's had it a lot more lately. He's had it a lot more in the second half. But typically we look up on nights where the Warriors lose, and a big part of the reason why is, they didn't get much from Wiggins tonight. Or tonight was one of those games where Wiggins kind of floated. And when they get those games from Wiggins like tonight, along with others, that's when this team looks at their most formidable. The Lakers did lose tonight. We should point that out. The Lakers did lose in Indiana tonight. So the Warriors do pick up some ground. It's basically 9, 10, or 11 as far as the Western Conference play-in race goes. The Lakers did lose in Indiana. So 41-33 of the Lakers. Warriors with the win, 39-34. So a game back in the loss column, a game and a half back overall, with the Warriors having played one fewer game than the Lakers. And the Warriors right now have the tiebreaker, although the tiebreaker is going to be determined basically based on who wins the fourth and final matchup on April 9th. It could be a little slide there still, but in all likelihood, if the Lakers win that game, they'd have the tiebreaker by virtue of having a better divisional record with the split in the season series being 2-2. If the Warriors win that one, they're gaining and they have the tiebreaker, and they're in really good shape at that point. But yeah, as we look at the standings and another big game tonight in Sacramento between Dallas and the Kings. Minnesota and Denver are playing. Like basically everybody is playing. I think 10 of the top 11 are all playing tonight, or 9 of the top 11 are playing in the. I guess it is 10 of the top 11 are playing.
JD, I want to bring up a couple of comments I saw from a couple of our regulars and
let's do
favorites. You're all our favorites, though. First one, because it relates back to a previous question of the night from a few shows ago. Douglas Mikes says something I found really interesting, saying a good Wiggins game gets us more than a good Kuminga game. I agree with that wholeheartedly, and that's not anything against Jonathan Kuminga to me, but I think it's Wiggins, as JD just said, can have a 12-point game that is incredibly effective. Jonathan Kuminga has been almost like he's been so consistent to where if he has a good game, but Wiggins and Clay are invisible, it can kill the Warriors. And Jonathan Kuminga's 14 points on 7 of 11 shooting might not really matter a whole lot. But I think when you see Wiggins get going, it does matter, because you can sort of expect a good 12 to 14 and hopefully more, but you could kind of expect that as a baseline out of Kuminga. So if you get a good Kuminga baseline plus a good Wiggins game, all of a sudden you're talking about a whole different team. Whereas when it's the other way around, you might get a pretty decent Kuminga and sometimes a really good Kuminga, but if Wiggins is invisible, that's just not enough. Like, this team's not good enough.
Here's the way I'll put it, and you let me know if this is fair or not, because I agree with Douglas Mikes on that comment. I think I think a good Wiggins game is more impactful. I would rather have Wiggins have 18 and Kuminga have 12 on 6 of 9 or 6 of 8, and then Kuminga have 24 and Wiggins have 6. Right? Like, it's 30. You got 30, and you get 30 points between the two in that particular scenario. I'd rather have it be 16-14, and then have it be 20-10 Kuminga. And there's been a lot of those 20-10 Kuminga, advantages, if you want to call it that. Obviously, they're not competing against each other. But no, I think
ties into, I think when you're playing the numbers game of like hypothetical points, it ties into something Erwin brings up right after, which is Jonathan Kuminga is probably better than anybody at getting free throws. I mean, Trace Jackson Davis can get to the line, but he's not very good from the line. Like, Kuminga's had pretty solid performances at the line. I mean, it's not always that way, but for the most part, Kuminga can get to the line. And if he's not really finding a way to put it in the bucket, he can at least get you 6 to 7 points from the free throw line on any given night without it being him just forcing it inside. Like, his athleticism alone can get you a good 3 to 4 trips at the free throw line.
Yeah, no doubt. And I agree with that. I agree with, it was Erwin. I agree with Erwin. I think he is the best on the team at getting to the free throw line. I mean, there's times where he'll just put his head down and not even have no chance to even make the shot, and he'll still get fouled. Like, he gets more bailout fouls than anybody. Like, there's probably at least once or twice a game where Kuminga will put his head down and I will think he's got nothing. And as it turns out, he didn't really have anything, but foul. And he gets to go to the line, and those are demoralizing. I mean, we've seen that a lot the few years, on the other way, right? The Warriors have gotten beat, I think, by teams that do that. They drive into the lane, pretty well defended, player not really a threat to score, but foul. And so, yeah, no, I think that is a big part. I mean, that's been a huge part of Kuminga's game. And that's been a part that's, on the nights, and there has been very few where Kuminga hasn't shot it well overall, because most of his buckets are at the rim. But there have been nights where he hasn't shot it well, and he still gets to the line, and it's you look up at the end of the night and he still got his 14 or 16 or even 22 on some of these nights, in part because of that. So I think, look, this team has had a difficult time when they've had everybody, finding the right blend of everybody. And I'm not saying they're better without Kuminga or anything like that, but it's finding the right blend of how much Kuminga, how much Wiggins. Do you have to take a little bit of Kuminga away to get more Wiggins? Is that beneficial? How do you work Trace Jackson Davis in? Because they really are all connected. Draymond is connected to TJD. TJD is connected to Kuminga, because if Kuminga's playing, he's playing the 4, which means Draymond plays the 5, which means TJD's now a backup role. It's all connected to Wiggins, who's the 3, and you need the ability to play, him with the others on the front line. So, that is I think, micro conversation that turns into a macro conversation as the Warriors look toward this offseason and trying to figure out their best path forward to be able to be a better team than they were this year, top to bottom.
Yeah, no doubt about it. By the way, just want to make a quick announcement before this one slips away from my head, because the phones were a topic of conversation earlier in the stream. No phones tonight, but tomorrow morning and the following Saturday, Just Dubs back in the studio. So Drew Down, if you're still with us, you can give us a call, as goes for anyone else here on the line. Numbers right down at the bottom of the screen. And Just Dubs, it's been a while, but we'll be back on the air in the studio as well as streaming on YouTube. Yeah,
10 a.m. until noon. Look for us then next couple of weeks, actually, with the Giants playing a couple of evening games, I guess late afternoon tomorrow, a 4:15 start down in San Diego, and then a night game a week from tomorrow as they get things rolling on the home slate next weekend, again against the Padres, both of these upcoming weekends. 808 KNBR is going to be a big part of tomorrow morning from 10 a.m. until noon. It's going to be exciting to get back on the radio, and then we're going to be on the radio on Sunday as well for Dubs OT, but always on YouTube and Twitch and the Twitter live stream and all of that. I know there could be some potential weather issues maybe in San Diego Sunday, which, the Giants game could get kicked a little bit later, and we'll figure it out on the fly. But the plan as of now, weather permitting, is we're going to be on the radio and here on the YouTube and Twitch and Twitter streams with Dubs OT, JD, and Greg Silver here on KNBR, the sports leader. Good win for the Warriors all in all. Just running through some of the other notes here, Greg. We talked about Wiggins. We talked about the paint dominance, which was profound early. I thought second quarter the Warriors had 4 or 5 really bad possessions after they got up 13. And they just didn't look like they knew what they wanted to do. The Chris Paul turnover thing tonight was odd. 4 turnovers for Chris Paul.
It's the game to do it, I guess.
Yeah, it's the game that you could do it and get away with it. But yeah, I thought, and I don't know, I mean, no excuses, but I did think, Greg, that maybe the different lineup combinations had something to do with it. Just, not having a plan, having Clay come up and not be able to play pretty soon prior to the game. You've got, different, all right, Chris Paul's going into the starting lineup now. Maybe somebody else is going to play a little bit more or play in a different combination than they were before. And that could create some unsureness to the offense. But yeah, after they got up 13, it wasn't a let up, but it was just some bad possessions consecutively. And all of a sudden from 36 to 23, it became 36-30. Moses Moody, big 3. After the Warriors called a timeout there to kind of stabilize, Charlotte started getting to the free throw line. And I thought the Warriors really looked their most lethargic in the second quarter as the game was bogging down and Charlotte was getting to the free throw line and they cut it down to 47-45 before Curry had the shot to close the second quarter and put the Warriors up 5, which I thought was a pretty huge shot. I mean, 47-45 going in would feel like, and it was still kind of a first half.
Well, look at all the bad sequences they've had to shoot themselves in the foot at the end of half.
Yeah.
So
well, and I think this was kind of one of them, but then Steph kind of saves them with the big shot there. So they're up 5, and then they came out third quarter and ramped it up, which was huge, and pushed it. Chris Paul, another turnover there, but they pushed it up to 19. Continuing to dominate in the paint. It was a really good Moody game. Curry came alive, 12 points in the third for Steph of his 23. And really the game I thought was over. Warriors were up 18 going to the fourth. And in the fourth, I mean, Charlotte got it to 15 maybe? I don't think it got closer than 15. Although I wasn't totally locked in as far as the margin and all of that. Warriors were up 21 with 8:51 left. And this was the other thing that it did kind of get under my skin a little bit. And we talked about this Sunday, and I guess I'll bring it up now. One of the points I made on Sunday, Greg, was, you've got the Charlotte and San Antonio games at the back end of the trip. And when there was all the discussion about, do you extend Curry's minutes in Minnesota, because the Warriors were playing well enough to win that game, but they needed Steph. And I would have, and I said this at the time, pushed Steph's minutes there with the intent on, all right, I'm going to have to pay it back later. Like, I'm going to push his minutes here. We can win this game. And at some point, I'm going to have to dial it back down the line. So, it's like using the credit card. You're going to have to pay the interest. And, if you wound up in a tight game tonight, maybe you got to rest Steph Curry a couple of more minutes tonight. But I'm more comfortable doing that tonight, even if it had been a close game, than doing it in the Minnesota game where you basically kneecap yourself by not having him out there. And let's be honest, that's exactly what happened in the game on Sunday. But the other part of that is you might be up 21 with 8:51 to go. And then when Steve Kerr says, I'm trying to buy some time with us having a little bit of a lead, or as long as we weren't down by too many, well, you're up 20 tonight. And so, and Steph played all the way. I know it's Charlotte, hometown. Seth is there, and Dell's calling the game on the Charlotte feet. Like, I get all of that. And I know Steve doesn't want to, without Kuminga and Clay, doesn't trust them blowing leads because they've blown so many leads. But, did Steph really need to play all the way to the 2? And I'm usually not that guy, but given what happened Sunday, like, to me, you could have paid it back with the Warriors up 21 and 8 minutes left tonight. And if it got down to 14 or 13, then you put him back in, but you put him back in with 4 minutes to go. And he plays 4 minutes there, and then maybe he plays 4 minutes less than he did tonight. And then you look up at the end of the night, he only played 30, maybe he plays 28 tonight, and you win by 12 instead of winning by 18. Again, I know you can't plan ahead on that ever, and you may write a check that you can't cash later on down the line and have to bite the bullet then. But that kind of, it bothered me that he was in so long tonight when there's been a conversation about his minutes. And it also, have a little bit of forward thinking about an entire trip, and knowing, you don't have to say it publicly, but knowing that the worst two teams you're going to play are the last two games of the trip, and think to yourself, maybe we can rely on the young guys a little more in those games. And that means push through the Minnesota game and try to win that one when you have it there.
No, I hear you. And I mean, my thoughts about Sunday, where I told you I would have started him in the fourth quarter. And if you could have found some minutes, to just 2 minutes even, to get him out in the middle of the fourth quarter, maybe you do that. But I've listened to a lot of the minutes conversation, both from our own hosts. I listened to Anthony Slater and Marcus Thompson talk about it. We had Marcus Thompson in studio this week, so got a little bit of a chance to chat some general Warriors with him. And I think that Marcus's philosophy, which I wouldn't have rested Steph an entire game on this trip because, frankly, the Warriors have just not been in a position where they can afford to do any of that, and the Rockets aren't losing. So that's the other layer in all of this. But Marcus is kind of
can't do
had
that.
the philosophy of, if you're going to play him 30 minutes, is it that big of a difference between playing him 34 when you still do the whole pregame process and you still do the warm-up and you're still going through your general rhythm in the game, but maybe you're just finding a shorter window to sit out there? Like, I don't know if that's as big of a difference between let's run him the extra 6 minutes in Minnesota, but then maybe he just sits out a whole game, which, again, I wouldn't sit him out a whole game, but I kind of get where he's coming from in that philosophy. So I'm with you. Like, normally I'm not the nitpicky guy either, but I think when you look at every game mattering, I would have played him more minutes in Minnesota. When you look at a night like tonight, like, maybe you could have risked it.
Well, and then I think there's also some politics to that too, because if you were going to rest him in a game, well, what's the game you would have rested him in? I mean, I would have rested him tonight, and he's not going to want to do that in his hometown of Charlotte with his dad calling the game on the other side and Seth injured, not playing, but part of the Hornets team. So, like, then I think that's a whole can of worms. I think, Steve, I thought tonight, I'll just be honest, I thought Steve left him out there because he was in Charlotte. I thought it was just like, you know what, when we give him a chance, I think it was, to me, it was more about that than thinking they were going to blow a lead, especially when earlier in the week you're comfortable taking him out against Minnesota, and then you say, hey, as long as we're hanging in there, well, you're up 21. So what, like, and you're like, I don't know, like, to me, that didn't make a lot of sense. I'm with you on the whole full game thing. I would not give him, I mean, I don't think you can afford to give him a game off, at this point. And we've seen without him, they can lose to anybody. I mean, they lost to the Spurs.
You're not going to rest him against San Antonio when you had to play 2 games against the Spurs without him, and one of them was the most disastrous game you've seen all year.
Yeah, no, I mean, they can't afford to do that. So I would limit it more in game. But again, we can take this conversation to the next year part of it, right? And the whole, like, how does it apply to next year? This team's got to figure out ways to be good enough to give Steph nights off here and there. And I know Steph doesn't like it. I know Steph doesn't want it. And here's the other thing. I think you're going to have to pick some nights. I think you got to build your team with the intent that you're going to give them some nights off, and you're still going to be able to win. Like, that's, like, again, I'm not saying 20, you might go 6-20 if he misses 26 games, but you got to be able to win a couple of games here and there without him. And you know what? I know he doesn't like sitting out at home, and I know Joe Lacob doesn't like him sitting out at home, but maybe you sit him out at home a little bit more. Again, this year it doesn't fit because they were, they're bad at home anyway. So you take Steph away, they're probably going to be worse at home. But typically the home games against San Antonio without Wembanyama are the games you'd rest him, or the home game against Charlotte or Washington, but the reality is they might lose to those teams too if he's not playing in those games. But I do think there has to be a plan moving forward next year. Add it to the list of all the conversations, right? Add it to the million lists of conversations about just how does this team manage maximizing Steph, but also still being able to win enough games to not be in this fight for 9, 10, 11 come March, because that was something that I think the Warriors truly believed, and we know the reasons why, but they truly believed that they weren't going to have to be in this position again where they were just fighting to win every game they could down the stretch just to basically stay 10th and maybe move up to 9th.
Yeah, and Regulator says it right here. Houston's kind of negating any rest for Steph at this point.
Totally.
So
yeah,
we don't have a full Sounds of Silver tonight, but we do have a sound of Silver.
Okay,
and then
let's do
there's
it.
also a couple of post-game quotes I'm looking at right now where one of them's funny. It's Steph from the court post-game, and he says they might have to stay in a hotel in San Francisco because of how much better they've been playing on the road.
You could do that this coming home game because it's only a one-off, right? I mean, you could basically just treat it like it's an 8-game trip, right? You go Minnesota to Miami to Orlando to Charlotte to San Antonio to San Francisco, stay in the hotel, and then right back to Houston and Dallas, and then not worry about actually coming home until that game on April the 7th.
Yeah, we got to get somebody on the staff. Like, I don't know what kind of connects you have in the travel department, JD, but you got to push that idea for him. I mean, got to get everything you can, and Dallas is a big game. So that was one. Another is Steve Kerr, and I haven't listened to the whole quote, obviously, being in the middle of the show, but he talks about what he's liking about the Draymond and Trace Jackson Davis pairing, which I found interesting because it does go back to the Douglas Mikes comment that we addressed a little bit earlier where, yeah, it's a pairing that isn't necessarily bad, but then the question is, what do you do with Kuminga in those kind of lineups? So that was fascinating. And then the third thing I wanted to get to, since we kind of look at some big picture topics, there's been a lot of discussion from Jay Williams on First Take saying he has high-level people texting him, questioning Steph Curry's leadership, and the whole inability to be able to control Draymond Green. And I don't agree with all of that. I think I'd be preaching to the choir if I did go on a rant, so I'm not going to. But thought Steve Kerr had a nice pregame quote that, pregame quotes on the road sometimes slip me by too. So just wanted to share this one, really saying if you could create a professional athlete from like AI or a video game, you would create the human being of Steph Curry. And this is what he had to say.
Design a human being to be a professional athlete and just create that person in a lab, you'd end up with Steph Curry. He relates to everybody and it's genuine. He's got a worldwide fan base that I think connects with him because he's relatable. They look at him and they think, maybe I could do that, even though they can't. There's no way they could. But his magic is that he kind of looks, like normal person, yeah. like maybe we could do that, and no, you can't, but you can keep believing. But he understands that, he knows his audience, and he understands the power that he has in such a beautiful way, the way he impacts people's everyday life, just whether it's signing an autograph or saying hello to someone, the way he carries himself. He connects people, he connects the world, and it's amazing to watch him every day.
Yeah, I mean, no qualms there. I mean, I think that's pretty spot on. And I mean, the Warriors have benefited from that now. I mean, really, since the day he got to Golden State and in Oakland and all of that, going back to 2009 and the Wild, those who were there, and I was not at this point, but those who were, I jumped on the scene in the Bay in 2011. But those that were there at the first, Steph Curry media day in 2009, it was, Monte Ellis a couple of tables down saying, yeah, we can't play together. This ain't going to work. And then it was Steven Jackson a couple of tables down from that saying, yeah, I want out. I want to trade now that I've just been paid. So at the back end of Don Nelson's second tenure with the Warriors, where he was basically cashing out and ready to go play poker in Hawaii. So it was, Steph walked into the vintage Golden State Warriors pre-Steph shit show. Like it was just, and to see what it became, quickly, and it didn't start immediately. That's the other part of it. All the questions about Steph's, health and the ankle thing and, the Monte thing. And they ended up getting it cleaned up by the 2012, 2013 season. And then that's when things really started to take off. You had Steve Kerr, you had Draymond, obviously Clay, and then the thing just, it skyrockets, and he's a multi-time MVP. And and all of the things that we've seen here over the last decade, which have just been amazing. And then, yeah, the personality on top of it. Although I think it really does start with the personality first, that leads toward everything else.
And I think that what we saw in Orlando a couple of nights ago just really exemplifies who he is as a leader and a teammate, and some of the humility in his game, but also the pride. Like, he could very well just know that this team is not a championship team and kind of just say, okay, we're going to get to the end of the season, or maybe I'm going to take nights off, or maybe I just am too fatigued and I don't have it. And look how emotional he was in Orlando to get through that game without Draymond. You saw him do the full court night after hitting the dagger. And there's a lot of pride in just how competitive he is and how much he's going to fight, even if that means to keep the 10 seed in a season. Like, they're trying to get every ounce of juice they can out of this core and this dynasty. And I think for fans, it can be hard to appreciate that in the moment. But what I've sort of started to realize and take a step back in the last week is, hey, they're not going to sell this thing short. Like, they very well could have blown it all up last offseason, and we could have been like seeing Klay Thompson do well elsewhere, or Draymond Green do elsewhere, and as new team that would not be contenders, and it would be Steph and a lot of young guys maybe, and we could be asking a lot of what if questions on a losing team. But I think it's cool that in the end you're going to look back and think that the Warriors really got every ounce of juice that they could have out of this thing.
Yeah, and I'm with you as far as next year goes. Like, I don't see a tear down. I think the question for next year is going to be how much of the second half successes that the Warriors had, how much of that do they double down on? And again, it's not the same as them doubling down last year, because the young players are much more a part of it than they were last year. I mean, TJD and Pajemski weren't even here. Kuminga did have an impact at this time last year, but by the playoffs, he had rendered himself unplayable. Obviously, that's very much different this year. I mean, he's leveled up, I think, twofold basically from where he was. So he's definitely a part of it. Wiggins, you're trying to figure out where he's going to fit in all of it. And then obviously the question has to be what happens with Klay Thompson and all of that. And I know a lot of the conversation, and we'll talk about this on the Just Dub show tomorrow on KNBR. There's been a big time discussion the last couple of days about, would this now be the time now that the Warriors would look to, maybe move off of Draymond Green in the offseason? I don't see that.
It's not going to happen too. Like, I'm not saying that I 100% think it should be X, Y, and Z. I'm just being realistic in that I can't go too far down that rabbit hole of conversation, because it's not going to happen unless he doesn't play basketball, period.
Well, and look, last night wasn't going to be the thing. I know Steve called it unforgivable, and you ran through all the different emotions of Steph related to it. And, that's all fair. That's all well and good. But the truth is it was a slip up in a long line of slip ups, but it wasn't even, like I said, in the top 10 of mistakes of Draymond Green's career. Maybe not in the top 15 of 20. We could keep going. And again, that doesn't make it right. I'm not trying to gloss over it, but to think that is the breaking point. I know that was sort of the joke the other night, fair or unfair. And I said this on our show. It wasn't like Draymond was never going to get ejected again. Like, he was, right. It's a matter of is it a one-off? I think you got one a year, maybe I think you got one a year, maybe two, but really one a year to, don't have it be something that leads to a suspension. And I think everybody can kind of deal with it, and accept it and have it, like, you can still grow and still have a setback where you get yourself thrown out of a game for not letting something go with an official, which is what happened the other night.
Yeah. Like, to me, there's a difference between normal standard of an NBA player ejection and frustration, and not that. And I think that just because this was the most recent one on top of all the other ones, it felt like, oh gosh, here we go again. But you look at what happened with Kelly Oubre the other night and the Sixers, or even the technical Dylan Brooks got for pushing Josh Giddey out of the way. Like, what Draymond did was pretty comparable to that level of where it's like, okay, yeah, toss him, tech him, whatever, and you move on from that. You compare something like what he did to Nurkic or what he did to Gobert, and that's not exactly the sort of thing that you see every night. And you can expect some suspensions coming that way. But, I think when Draymond, it's because of who he is, it's always going to be a little bit extra tense around the conversation of an ejection. But then it's always about the question of like, okay, is this something you could see on any given night versus no? I know this is a little bit of a side tangent, JD, but that fight between the Browns and the Steelers with Myles Garrett and the helmet and Mason Rudolph. So that was a Thursday night game where I had some other commitment to tend to. I was in college, and my roommates were texting me, who kind of like lightly watched football, but not watching it every week heavily. And they're like, whoa, that fight. Did you see that? That was crazy. And I was kind of thinking like, oh, okay, like an NFL fight. Benches may be cleared. There's probably some physicality, like that's funny. And then I check social media and see exactly what happened. And I'm like, oh, yeah. That's not like normal by the standard of physicality or things getting heated in the NFL. So I just relay that to Draymond in the sense of, is it something you could see on any given night or is it not?
Yeah, and look, I think our buddy Andis Brown chimed in. Dre was really quiet toward the refs and didn't even engage Grant Williams. I thought he engaged Grant Williams a little bit. I'm guessing Steph and or Kerr talked with Dre yesterday, or Dre actually feels he disappointed Steph. Look, I've said this. I think Dre always, after the fact, knows he screwed up when he screws up. And look, the fact that I know there's a lot of people that hear, oh, well, Steph and Steve had to have conversations with him. Enough is enough. They've had conversations. Yeah, they have. Well, it ain't ever going to be completely gone. Like it will not, like any conversations that were had in December or January were, hopefully it's not stemming from something that severe ever again, but to think that they were never going to have another conversation about behavior or keeping things cool, or are you in a good place mentally right now? Or do you think you're about to kind of lose your stuff? Like then we'll work through it. Well, if you need to take a day, whatever, figure it out. Like if I need to get you out of a game, like that's always going to be an ongoing thing for the remainder of Draymond's career. Erwin Kwong Moody's persistent professionalism and energy finally paying off. Also helps when he gets consistent minutes. Yeah, I don't know about the last part. And I still Moody has to show. I still feel like Moody, when he becomes part of the plan, he doesn't play as well. Like when Moody has been given 5-6 games in a row, he ends up playing his way out of the rotation. Basically when he's planned into the rotation, but when he isn't planned into the rotation and he just has to play, that's when, for the most part, he's pretty good. And so, I think, how do you shake that? I don't know. Again, I thought, Steve tried to put him in there, and then he had a stretch of 4 or 5 games where he didn't play well. And then he found himself not playing. I mean, that has been the perpetual cycle. Again, I like Moody's game. But it just hasn't always fit, in conjunction with the rest of the other combinations that the Warriors have to play. But hats off to Moody. I mean, good for Moody. He's helping him. Tonight, I thought, was one of his better games. Overall, I think if he can consistently make threes, he can play in this league, period. Because I do think he's put his game, to a point where he is a better defender. He's using that wingspan to greater lengths, and should be somebody in today's NBA that can be out. I think he's improved his quickness. Like he is somebody that should be able to play consistently, really on any team on any given night. A couple of people mentioning Trace Jackson Davis. We talked about TJD a little bit at the beginning. Want to make sure he gets his just due, though. I mean, Drew Down, TJD was beasting. We did talk about Douglas Mikes saying he should be starting. And then Douglas Mikes added, Kuminga either has to learn how to play the three or goes to the bench, or, and I think the other or, ... or they trade him. I'll fill in the blank there. A couple of people did say Kuminga on the bench, but, I don't know. I haven't completely. I just don't see how I don't see how, when you look at how the Warriors have deployed Kuminga and the things that they value from Kuminga and the way that they like him to play, I just don't see them saying in the offseason, all right, JK, you're the three. You're going to be the three. Go learn how to be a three. I just don't think that given the things that they've said about him are going to look to do that. So, again, I think the most likely scenario is Draymond and Kuminga and Wiggins are the starting front court next year, in part because you probably still can't trade Wiggins, and Trace Jackson Davis is coming off the bench, and you can play TJD with Draymond, you can play TJD with Kuminga, but you can't play the three of them together. And you can still, with two of the three, cover a significant amount of the game to where you're getting the best out of all of them. I actually don't think it's that big of a deal, but it is going to be interesting if the Warriors do move off of Wiggins, because I know I've said I think they're going to at least explore that. What do they do at the three? Because they do not have another three, as we've said, on their roster, and I just don't think the Warriors want to use next year. I kind of danced around it. I just don't think the Warriors want to use next year to allow Kuminga to learn how to play the three. That's the kind of thing that the Pistons would do. That's the kind of thing that Charlotte next year would do. When you're going to win 20 games like that, it's just not. I don't think that's a winner. And again, I don't disagree about Draymond needing to play maybe a little bit more of the four and being better when he plays the four. But I do think it's a matter of balancing out the minutes again between the rest of it. Andis, it's hard to get any intel from this game. Charlotte is that bad. Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't take a lot of intel, and it's just they won. There was no drama down the stretch. They didn't play great the whole game, but they also didn't have two scorers, including the guy that's been their number two for the better part of the entire season, and they won comfortably. That's all the intel you need. It's not about matchups or strategy or anything like that. It's just they went on the road tonight and handled business, and now do it again on Sunday in San Antonio and come back and keep things rolling at that particular point in time. All right, couple of minutes here to go. We are going to wrap this thing up at about 7:30. I do want to get a little bit of fun with numbers, and then while we're kind of rolling through that, I want to make sure we get to some of the comments from the YouTube chat as well. Some of the better ones between in really the last 45 minutes or so. We've kind of gone through the first 40 minutes of the comments, and I don't always get to them in real time. I kind of like to let them build up and then scroll through them from time to time. And I hate at the end of the night when we let some good takes pass us by. But yeah, fun with numbers. Here it is, Dubs OT with JD and Greg Silver, KNBR, the sports leader on YouTube, Twitch, and the Twitter stream. Giants, by the way, 3-0 lead in San Diego. That's a good thing. Matt Chapman hit a bomb. And so, yeah, I know nothing. Everybody gets so excited for baseball season, and I love baseball season. And I was that guy yesterday, and even today, I was watching the Mets and the Brewers. I was watching the Phillies and the Braves, but it's like you gotta chill off of the one game. Like everybody freaks out the first game and the first 5 games and the first
I joked yesterday, JD. I joked to my family that I was like, yeah, looking at the schedule, I thought if they could get that first one in San Diego, they they could get to 150, but now I don't know if they get to 90.
I mean, it's just like it is, and I know I'm not the first person. I'm sure it was probably a consistent refrain on KNBR today, but it's like, I mean, the Giants could have played the game that they played yesterday on June 17th, and nobody would even remember it by the end of the season. Like it's okay. Yes, they got they had the lead, and Logan Webb got nickel and dimed and deserved better, and Luke Jackson didn't have it and then got hurt, and they lost. It's okay. It's okay. What's the old everybody wins 60, everybody loses 60. So put that one in one of the 60 in the L60 category. So yeah, fun with numbers here to wrap things up tonight. And Greg, I'm trying to find. I got a bunch of different screens going here as I get off on a little mini Giant rant. I do wanted to find some of what we should give a Klay Thompson update. Per Kendra Andrews on hand in Charlotte. Steve Kerr said post-game Klay started feeling some knee soreness in Orlando, felt it again during warmups tonight. Rick Celebrini decided it wasn't a good idea for him to play. So Klay's status for Sunday's game in San Antonio is to be determined. That was officially, I think, listed as tendonitis. I know Kerr used the term tendonitis with respect to Kuminga, but his status was still listed as soreness officially. And the Warriors are 3-0 without Kuminga. Again, not reading too much into that, but they have won the last two. Only the third game that Kuminga's missed. They beat the Pelicans in New Orleans very early on in the season. Trace Jackson Davis leading the Warriors in blocks this season. A nice line for TJD, 18-8, 3 blocks, 9 of 13 shooting the ball from TJD as he continues to be extremely impactful. Greg, you mentioned earlier, we'll reiterate here, the Warriors on the road during this trip, 18, 26, 11, and 17 first quarter points allowed. That is an average of 18. The Warriors defense has been good on the road. They're also facing teams, in all fairness, that can't hit open shots that are being
I say both. Like it's both, but also we've seen them have horrendous defense against teams you'd think are undermanned or not very good too. So I'm not saying it means nothing either.
Yeah, I agree with you on the effort part, but I also think that there are some teams that are incapable of hitting shots consistently. Orlando, Charlotte, Miami, especially when they don't have Jimmy Butler. Like you're playing you're playing three teams. Even Minnesota at times will miss some wide open looks that they are granted in some of these games. So 21-15 on the road. That is no joke, including 13 of the last 16 away from home. Another winning road trip for the Warriors and another winning road record for the full season. They clinched that tonight with 5 games still to go on the road. 15th time in franchise history, 8th time in the last 11 years, the Warriors have had a winning record on the road for a full season. And the Warriors joined, how about this, the Celtics as the only teams this season to win at least 13 of 16 on the road, which the Warriors hadn't done in 5 years. They swept Charlotte. I didn't realize this, and maybe this was mentioned on the NBC Sports Bay Area telecast. The Warriors hadn't won in Charlotte since 2019. They hadn't won in Charlotte. They hadn't won in Charlotte since before COVID. I mean, they hadn't won in Orlando since 2017. Like the Warriors are checking some freaking boxes on this road trip. And another night where they hold the opponent under 100. So, yeah, I think the defense has been a legitimate part of this. And so, yeah, they held the opponent under 100 once again. So what does that make them? 7-0, 8-0, I think, this season when they hold their opponent under 100. There's much more of those games recently. And, yeah, some individual notes. 52nd time for Curry, 20 or more. The Warriors used their 24th different starting lineup in the game tonight with CP and Steph in the backcourt. Andrew Wiggins, 20 or more for the 11th time. He's done it the last couple of games. And again, Moses Moody, we've talked a lot about Moses Moody. double figures and a season high tying 4 3-pointers. 4 times this year, Greg, Moses Moody has hit 4 or more 3-pointers. So some
play in there too.
Yeah, the 4-point play. Exactly. 4-point play in there too. So yeah, final comments to you. I know we're going to reconvene tomorrow on KNBR on the radio and here on YouTube and Twitch at 10 a.m. until noon. And then I'll try to sneak in a couple of these final comments here real quickly while you're talking.
Yeah, just a reminder, Just Dubs back in the studio 10 to noon tomorrow and the following week. So you can call into the show because I know that we did not have that privilege tonight, but it's a busy season. It's a good season. And, the Warriors have had a lot of ups and a lot of downs. They have terrible skids. They have nice winning streaks. And I just want to say that whatever we do with the rest of these shows, don't give up on the Warriors, but also don't give up on John Dickinson and his decorations. Erwin, as promised, the corner shelf may happen. And Douglas Mikes, maybe even a hamster wheel as well. So
hamster wheel.
You gotta have some Steph Curry kind of resilience here.
Ferrari posters. Yeah, all those things. Hilarious. So yeah, appreciate everybody. Quickly, just keeping everybody updated on what's going on in Utah. The Jazz have a 47-41 lead on the Rockets. So the Rockets have won 10 in a row. But the trail the Jazz 47-41. That game is at the half. The Warriors did gain ground on the Lakers, who lost in Indiana, blown out in Indiana 109-90. And Sacramento has an early lead on Dallas again. That could affect not the Warriors passing either of those two teams, but that could affect who ends up among the other teams in the play-in tournament that the Warriors potentially could play in an elimination game if they survive the 9-10 matchup. So the Kings, after getting blown out by Dallas Tuesday, they're up 11 toward the end of the first quarter in Sacramento in that one. Greg, great stuff. Appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for watching. We will continue this conversation tomorrow, 10 a.m. until noon. KNBR, the sports leader. We'll talk to you then.